welcome to FaceHammer episode 101. It is me, Russ the Face, and I'm joined by my co-host, Byron Ord.
There, you're sounding super sexy on your new microphone. Is that appropriately because it's Slaanesh? We're deep diving on Slaanesh, so you now need the voice of an orator.
Yeah, exactly. So I used some of the funds from the templates to upgrade my audio, so hopefully it should get rid of some of the annoying whine and different, and not as what that we whinge, but I mean the annoying whine on the microphone that I have to cut out sometimes.
There's an easy joke there. I'm not going to take it.
I know. So thanks to everyone who supported us picking up those piece of merchandise, and it's good to reinvest it. So hopefully it will improve your listening pleasure. And speaking of pleasure,
let's pain. And
everything else that's to do with excess and hedonism. Slaanesh come out at the weekend. We've already done a Battletome review with Daughters of Cain and HEDONITES of SLAANEsh mega show that we released on day. So effectively check that out.
Thanks for the comments and the input as well. Obviously, when you're doing things for the first time, we're not going to get things absolutely bob on every go. So we always appreciate people jumping in with their thoughts, opinions, and or corrections.
Yeah. So in this show, we're actually going to take a deep dive into the HEDONITES of SLAANEsh Battletome.
I'm sure they'd love that.
I know, exactly. And the reason I'm going to do it on HEDONITES of SLAANEsh is because I'm excited about them. And I've written some lists. And actually, I think that the HEDONITES of SLAANEsh Battletome is better than the Daughters of Cain book.
You can't mean, what about if it does 700 wounds in a second?
Well, I'll quantify that statement maybe later. Well, maybe now, because everyone's just going to turn the video off and go, what are you talking about? Or the podcast off.
All right, then. So what is better, Russ? What better are you using?
That's the point. So a lot of people online have been complaining, as usual. I mean, obviously it's a vocal minority, I imagine, about the HEDONITES of SLAANEsh Battletome being weak from a competitive play point of view.
Yeah, now, plenty of it's been constructive. There's definitely some hugely valid points within there.
And I think when you look at raw number to points, damage output, things that make armies generally competitive, there's definitely an argument for that. However, from my point of view, I always try and look for the alternative strength in an army, because the problem with Daughters of Cain is we described it as a fine wine, like a refined vintage, and that means that people have already got 2 years of play under their belt against that army. They know.
Yeah, they didn't exactly it's not that they've chucked everything out and reevaluate. It's working how it has always worked, and I mean this isn't going to be a spoiler to anyone at this point. I think probably the strongest lists look like they're 80%. Of the last strong list, probably, arguably, that the best there as far as power level goes.
They're also going to be very popular because of the power and because of the models. Obviously, the accessibility of doing the army. It's a cool army. I'm not taking anything away from Daughters of Cain. It's a great army. It's very competitive.
Huge range of fairly modern plastics, and aside from the tax of having to paint the infantry, a lot of the stuff is fun to build and to paint and to look at. So.
Yeah, and I think when you go into collecting an army, and especially when you're talking about matched play and go into events, and obviously in the UK we've had the announcement about the lockdown kind of phasing out and when events will start back up again. That means that when you pick an army, if you pick something that's very popular, that's what we call a meta choice, everyone's going to be thinking and prepping and practicing against it. So when you get to a table, people are going to know how to play against it and how to counter it. And that might take a little bit of time, but Daughters aren't new. So normally when you get a book like the previous HEDONITES book, it was new. So it was a bit of a shock to the system. The same with...
Oh my God, how do you deal with depravity and keepers ×3 and... all the most efficient summoning that Chaos has ever had, I believe, and stuff like that. That really shook stuff up quite a lot, didn't it?
Yeah,
Daughters hasn't. Snakes now relevant.
They are, but
it's not a huge mix up to the tome, is it? I
still think that the Daughters' most competitive list will gravitate towards the Cauldron Guard style witch elf
60 to
blocks,
90,
very
60 to
similar.
90 witches, a cauldron, Amarathi.
And you might see a couple of
remaining
snake
points.
lists. You'll see more snakes you did before for sure, and I think people will play. I think Keltnar is going to be popular. But the thing about Daughters, and like I say, it's a known entity, and also obviously we know that points change and things are in flux. So let's be honest, like there's probably going to be some sort of update around the summer, around the General's Handbook timing, because it normally is. Yeah. So, you know, what's going to happen to those point values? Now, historically, Daughters of Cain have kind of got away with it. They've always come out quite cheap and they haven't really been that affected by it. And, you know, I don't think breaking the army is not something that should happen, or reinventing the wheel. Like there's no point ripping up the book and starting again just because people are popular and it's doing well, because every army should be popular and doing well. But I think that it's a bit of a blunt instrument in some ways, in that it's you almost trying to push that raw attack power down people's throats to win games. Especially
what look like, I mean, this is a slight sideline, but if you're going to min-max something on damage output, that generally, you know, that doesn't take into account things that are subjective, you know, like, or more subjective, like ability to position amazingly on the table, or flexibility or ability to adapt mid-game, you know, like realistic wounds, whatever it is, that type of stuff. If you're just looking at a maths equation, you're looking at a maths equation, and that's going to involve you putting more of the same thing that does a lot of damage and maybe a couple of alternative ways to do damage or alternative ways to do resilience on the table due to maths. Yeah. That's not all that matters on the table, is it? So the meta build, I think, is a particularly extreme example in a book that is a fairly extreme example already of, as you said, just mixing it across the table and ramming your damage down people's throats until they're dead.
Yeah, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, and it will win games. But the point with the Hedonites book, it's kind of widely perceived it's on the weaker side. So for starters, you can probably find that points value changes will be favourable. Yeah. So things will come into your favour. So you'll end up with more, not less. Whereas I think Daughters is the opposite side of that coin.
Yeah. If you feel like you're getting away with it, then that is the type of thing that is more likely to get changed than if you feel slightly hard done by.
And playing with a book like this is going to make you a better Age of Sigmar player, because you have to play
your tits off,
outside the box, and be a little bit more creative with your list building. And one of the things that I've kind of, as I've been looking at the Slaanesh book, it has a lot of counters to things that people have, like minuses to wound, minuses to hit, stopping command abilities, movement, disruption, particularly when you look at the ally pool and you look at things like Slaves to Darkness and Wrath of the Everchosen.
Unrestricted ally pool in comparison to Daughters, you know, obviously there's more armies out there to compare this to, but they did drop on the same weekend. And I think that's a reason, particularly for the type of conversations that people are having. They came out on the same day. So looking at them in that light, yeah.
Yeah, and we spoke about Be'lakor, and obviously we've seen the preview for the weekend, where we're not going to talk about the preview too much in this video because we're going to do a follow-up WARHAMMER video and we'll talk about it there. But we saw that Be'lakor reveal, or, you know, sort of teaser montage, if you want to call it that. So obviously, like, he's obviously a great ally in Hedonites, and like, he's so disruptive. And I think that the thing about Hedonites is that you've got a book that not everyone's going to jump on. There's a lot of different things you can do with it.
Fairly internally balanced. It's not like one obvious, much more points efficient list at all.
No, and I think it's going to come out of any updates in a better position than it went into it.
Agreed.
Which I think is important. I also believe that you'll go to a table and your opponent will be less prepared to play against a Hedonites list.
In terms of how they know how your army works, but also, like, literally, you can do some easy things to armies to make them counter widely used meta armies in terms of item specification and stuff like that. I used to do this a lot. I know you do it a lot when you're attending an event. Rather than taking a unit option, I used to really heavily preference taking an item option, because I like playing my army how I play my army. I try to build the best army for all situations, and then maybe I take, like, a perfect example would be whatever it was called, the Glittering Amulet, where at the beginning of one combat phase, you get to have -1 to hit for everything within 3 inches or something like that.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot of easy takes out there that are going to limit a Daughters player efficiently without you ruining your army, and people will opt into that type of thing.
Yeah, and there's obviously depravity in Slaanesh is important because it means you get more units throughout the game, and you could be flexible with what you spend those points on.
Yeah.
There's strategies to maximize that, and I've seen some lists where they include, is it Ogroid Crushers or whatever they're called, Firmagoid Crushers, to blow up their own Fane to do damage, and where it might look like a good idea. I'm not sure spending 100 points on that model to do that is worth the damage you're doing to your own army.
No, I've got some quite strong opinions on this type of stuff because I really like affecting a board in as many ways as possible. And I think particularly if you're trying to shoot multiple units and do a bit of damage and not kill them with, it's not always going to be shooting, but it's quite easy to do that with shooting, to split shots with shooting. It's more practical. So that's probably the average way that people are going to approach it, especially from early game, if you're not in combat or giving away units or whatever. If you're just trying to farm a resource that doesn't immediately affect the board, like you might not be, is there a negative to wiping out units? What if you need exactly this many summoning points and you wipe out a unit and you can't drop that unit you need as a result? You're not affecting the board, you're not killing your opponent as much, and there is always something to be said for just why Nurgle troops are so good and stuff like that. Just going somewhere, being in the right place, knowing that you're going to be there for a certain amount of time, and or killing your opposition at that bit of the table. I think if you're going so deeply into resource farming, you're really banking on it working in the late game. Scenarios, a lot of them you score from turn 1. What if you can't really bank that equity in a way that is meaningful until turn 2 and a bit or 3, or you lose a priority, and that means you just can't drop the stuff where you want it, or your opponent's good at screening or mega resilient or anything.
And no one wants to bunch up around a piece of terrain ready to do their big hit, go first, damage their army, and then get doubled back, right? I mean, no point having those points if you can't spend them because you've got no heroes left, or you've got no models left.
Yeah, not only that, but the resilient parts of the Slaanesh army are not cheap. Like, if you're either you're putting a screen that's just going to get killed, like your army is squishy in general, you're putting something that's going to get killed, or you're trying to play Slaanesh like Nurgle, in which case you may as well be playing Nurgle.
I disagree with that. I actually think that the Slaanesh army could potentially be more defensive than a Nurgle army.
All right, then. Let's see.
I've got some lists, and one of them I've lent into that, and I'm going to explain why it's very defensive. And I think that might be the most competitive way to play it. And you've got some really good units added in. So I think, basically, to summarize what I'm saying, HEDONITES of SLAANESH is a very good battle tome because people won't be prepared for it. It's very flexible. It's probably going to come out better than worse, and it's going to make you a better player at AGE of Sigmar. So I think if you practice with it, if you were going to events, I actually think from a competitive point of view, it's a better investment than Daughters of Khaine. Now,
looking to the future as well, you like 2 events after the event where you did take it, you will have learnt more and be a better player at that point rather than, not learning until game 5 because you just ruffled people.
Exactly. So better is a more competitive, or better is kind of a weird term anyway, because some people go to compete for different things, or I always think the best way to go into an event is trying to compete with your own performance from the previous event rather than the other people around you. And then things like will come by improving your own game. Eventually you will end up with those awards and those podiums rather than chasing the podium and looking outwards rather than inwards, because I think it's a very personal journey to get good at any sort of competitive game.
Yeah.
And there's obviously stuff to look at out there that will make a difference, but but I personally think HEDONITES of SLAANESH is a better battle tome for those reasons. So people can disagree. You can put it in the comments or let me know. That's fine. And that's completely your own opinion. And that's
I'd like to know where people watching would rank it as well. Like in my mind, I see it kind of at maybe not. I'd rank it in terms of internal balance and roughly power level with like Iron Jaws. What other stuff would you put it kind of?
It's interesting
parallel with.
because there are these tier lists you see from computer games. You can go and generate them, and AOS Coach did a really good, concise video on the change points from the Slaanesh Battle Tome.
Yeah,
and
we can link that below.
And he does a tier list, and you create it yourself and put stuff in. And there's this term that's battered around at the moment for Age of Sigmar called the fat middle, which is which is obviously I know all about that, but it's the middle of the pack books that are, okay, and they're fine, and I think it sits in there, and I think that's the place you want to be. Personally, I think Hedonites is a little bit of a sleeper. I think people are going to sleep on it. I think it's more competitive than people give it credit for. I still think it's in that middle pack, but I think it's the upper side of it. I actually think it's better than Iron Jaws.
Okay.
For many reasons, purely because, well, I should say Orc War Clans really, but I think Orc War Clans has Big War, which is kind of head and shoulders above the other two. If you play Iron Jaws or Bone Splitters, you have very big weaknesses you can't shore up, even with allies.
Or you crutch yourself. You go Bone Grins, and then you're playing a game of Sigmar on. Nothing wrong with that.
You just don't have the depth of War Scrolls. Like Chaos has a lot more choice. And with the Hedonites book, you've just doubled your choices because you've added all this mortals in, but you've still got all the slave stuff. And some of those slaves book units don't need anything to be effective, and you'll see that in the list. So let's get into the list, and we're back in a sec to talk about that. So we are back from the break, and I just want to go straight into the army list. I do have some other images and stuff that I can talk through as we reference it. Obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, we'll just try and explain it to you so you can understand it. So the first list. Now, when we did the Hedonites review, I didn't talk about Wrath of the Everchosen. Now, Wrath of the Everchosen is a supplement book, and in there is almost like you could get the temples for Daughters of Cain. They have that for Slaanesh. So one of those is the Lurid Haze Invaders host. So the first list is using that host temple bolt on. So you still get your invaders rules, but these go on top and they force you to take an artifact and give you an extra command ability and things like that. So basically from that we have got a few things. So I'll talk about that now. I've got up on the screen for people watching. So you get an ability. So after you set up, but before the first battle round, you can remove D3 friendly Lurid Haze Invader host units from the battlefield. Say they're in ambush. And then what allows you to do is during your first movement phase at the end, you must set them up wholly within 6 of the edge of the battlefield more than 9. So it gives you an ability to protect key pieces against Alpha Strike lists. So it allows you to remove, like Gluteus, if you know you're going to go against KO, they're going to target him and kill him. You can remove him from the table. You can remove another model from the table, like your Death Star unit if you want to. And it allows you to keep those safe. Now, the other way you can use it is aggressively. So it might make your opponent miss this because it's after setup. So they might set up their army and leave a gap or something open, and then you can go, right, I'm going to put this unit off. Then they might think, oh, I don't want to give you first turn now. So if they give you first turn,
you're just giving them more decisions, aren't you?
Yeah, you're making
more uncertainty, more decisions.
Yeah, and the list I've got a hero, the Mask, and she is there to go off the table because in Invaders you could pick up to 3 generals, and you get depravity if a general is in their territory. So this allows you to put a general in their territory on turn 1. But the Mask is kind of cool because she's a very independent model to operate on its own, pretty defensive. Yeah. You don't need anything. She's just an annoying piece, and even if you don't use her that way, she still gives you the locus of diversion because she's a demon. She's quite cheap. So, but you can use it way more aggressively if you want, using archers to snipe off a hero or something else, depending on what they've done. So
yeah, definitely. The other way, not that you can do it in this list, but there's a very skitsy things that happen that happens frequently with armies that have got a large proportion of fast move potential troops, and that is that you can have your other stuff left behind. So it is quite a nice way, I think. Let's say you're taking heavily armored, what the heavily armored guys on foot called?
Myrmidons.
Yeah, if you're something of that type, you can bring them on, and they could have, you know, flexibly got to move around the table without being restricted by their movement 6 or less in comparison to, you know, your Hellstriders, your Fiends, whatever else you have that is speedy. And it's a way to deliver those slower moving, few resilient things you have in your armies to tar pit people or hold them up or speed bump them or anything like that.
Yeah, and it's a nice optional thing you can do. You don't have to decide before you deploy. You can wait to see what the board state's like. It gives your opponent something to think about. I think it's really good for that. You also get a trait, which is reroll run rolls for invader host units whole within 12 of the general. It's okay. I mean, it's fine. Reroll runs. It's fine. You've got a command ability, which is quite interesting because, you know, this is like an extra thing you get. So you can use it once per turn in the combat phase. Pick a Lurid Haze Invader host unit whole within 12 of the hero. Until the end of the phase, add 1 to save rolls for attacks that target the unit. So
nice.
You get a +1 save, so that gives you some resilience in the army for a command point. So it's actually pretty good, especially as you can do it in their turn. So if they go first and they go and try and alpha a unit, you can give it a +1 save with a command point. So
obviously you can only do this once, right? You can't give them plus.
No, it's one. You're going to use it once per combat phase. So you can't even do multiple units. You do one unit per phase. So.
Worth knowing. That kind of pushes you towards having a star of some point, right? If you were going to press on that as a theme.
Yeah. And then you also get an artifact, which is the oil, which gives you +1 wound. It's fine. Like an extra wound on a hero is, you know, it's still good.
It can take them out of easily killable with a lucky 1-hit range with a spell or something like that.
Yeah. So the Lurid Host, you get with that all the invader stuff, which is the depravity generation and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, your artifact and your command trait is fixed for you, but you get the extra command ability and that special rule. So the list is Glutos or Sulian, Lord of Gluttony. Because
what are we going to be calling him for the rest of the episode? Just to make it easier?
I might call him the big man. So it's the big man, and he has the spell, which is Dark Delusions. Now the reason I went with so he, just so you know what he does, and you know it's kind of important to understand why he's in the list and why he's in pretty much every list I run. It is because of, for his points, he does something that nothing else does. He's almost like Marathi in Daughters of Cain.
He behaves like a Nurgle, right? That's the way that I think of him. I actually keep tongue slipping when talking about him, and in my head, because he's big and fat and resilient, he's a Nurgle model.
Yeah. So obviously, like, big, lots of wounds, decent armor save, gives you the -1 to hit bubble. Everything else in there is whatever. He's alright in combat. He's like a more resilient, slightly worse in combat Keeper of Secrets is how I view him. But with a phenomenal buff, and he can cast 2 spells. He's a wizard. He's just decent, right? You can't.
And he's cool, right?
Yeah.
What a model.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, like he's great. So he's in the list. He's pretty much in every list I write at the moment. Once I've played for some more games, I might change that, but I can't see that happening. So he's in there now. Dark Delusions as a spell is it's okay. It's an 18-inch range. And I believe I am flipping around stuff here, so you have to bear with me. I believe this one does, if I can find it, it does roll 2d6. So if it's greater than their bravery, you get to add 1 to hit rolls for a unit that targets it until the next hero phase. So it's allows you to get a bonus to hit. So
for all units targeting that unit, the unit's been debuffed potentially.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's
So
useful for archers or different units. Not
yeah, and the reason I didn't put it on the Shard Speaker is because the Shard Speaker has a very good spell and only gets one spell. So
you just don't think you'd be using it that much.
no, not from that model, and also that model's very easy to kill.
That's the other one, right?
So, now I've got the Shard Speaker is my general, and that's because it's the only non-character I've got, the non-named character that can actually have anything of this stuff. So it's got extra wound, it's got the command trait, which gets to reroll the runs, and obviously it's got Battle Rapture as the spell, which is the immune to battle shock. And the reason for that is in early turns, his spell is only a range of 12, so it's not likely you're going to be debuffing anything, and that's a them -1 to wound on you. So I think that you almost first turn you're using it to shore up your bravery of your archers, and then you're using Gluteus, so you're going to be more aggressive with, might be in range to do Dark Delusions.
Nice that it doesn't cost a CP. Kind of feels like it's for free if you get that one off.
Yeah, and you've obviously got Mystic Shield as well, and then you've got the command ability, so +1 save reroll ones is pretty decent, especially like Gluteus ends up with a 2+ save reroll in ones with an after save. So this is why I was saying that these hosts give you access to more survivability than you normally get. So the mask, sort of talk about the mask, and I made this as a host option, a general, because in this host as well, as soon as your first general dies, you get a command point for free. So the mask is kind of like, deal with me, kill me, give me depravity. If you kill me completely, give me a command point. So for me, it's decent. You know, like the mask is, I think, like one of those models that you very easy to overlook it.
Yeah, 100%.
And 10-inch move. It's got the it's basically can pile in 6 instead of 3, so it can fly, moves an extra 3 when it piles in, run and charge. It's got a 4-up ignore. Just really good. It's got the locus. I mean, you put the mask on the corner, they can't pile in. You can do some really disruptive things with this, especially against like a shooting unit that have to shoot you, probably kill you.
Just launch like an annoyance dart as well. Yeah. I mean, you've got reroll. It's nice that you've got something that's got run and charge in there as well, right? Because you get to reroll your runs. So that 10-inch move and run and charge is now more reliably going to be, you could be going a long way with that really easily. And then piling in, that's nifty.
Yeah, and then with the other stuff in this army, so obviously that's the hero suite. One of the important things about the Shard Speaker is the shooting phase debuff you get, which is I think I've just killed the War Scroll by accident, which is annoying. But you can pick an enemy unit within 9, and then that allows you to get a bonus against it. So I believe it's +1 to wound or something like that. But yeah, so it's pretty decent. And then it's for free. It's on a free up, but it's for the combat phase, so it doesn't buff anything to do with your shooting, but it's decent. So the Hellstriders for Battle Line. Now, I wrote a lot of lists trying to use the Lord of Pain to get the new infantry as Battle Line. Mm-hmm. And actually, because you've got that tax, and although he's got a good command ability, it only really affects the mortals.
Is it a trap?
Yeah, I think so.
In armies that aren't mortal based, basically.
And actually, looking at what you get with 5 Myrmidish Painbringers, I think you get more just having Chaos Warriors. And you don't need anything to make them Battle Line, and they are cheaper by a lot because you want them for the defensive ability. And for the offensive ability of the Twin Souls, yes, they do a lot of damage, but they're also not very resilient. And I think I'm trying to lean into fast, effective damage which can be protected. And I'm not saying they're not worth taking, but for me, Hellstriders, they're damage 2 on the charge. And I think the Hell Scourges are better because the Hell Scourges give you a -1 to hit when you charge with them. So if Ascilius in range, then or Scullion is in range, say Glutos. If Glutos is in range, you're going to be -2 to hit them. So you can charge them to pin, so you can use them as an aggressive screen. So rather than stand in front of them, you could just charge them. They've got a 3-inch reach as well, which is very useful because you can stay very compact just in range on a side, hit them, and they go, right, well, I'll pile in, but I'm -2 to hit. Actually, that's a very good way of minimizing damage. And
yeah, don't worry about your save if you don't need to take it, right?
No, and also they're probably going to chip a couple wounds through. They've got a 4-up save, they've got 10 wounds. That means you get into depravity. So for me, the Hellstriders are probably the go-to battle line units in Slaanesh.
Interesting. And you get the option to drop these as ambushing little horse darts as well, don't you?
Yeah.
Reach 3, ambush potential. It's just a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, and the spears are 10 points cheaper, which is the only reason they're known there rather than the scourges. So they get +1 damage on the charge. But, they're still got, 3 attacks a model, freeze 4s, it's got rend. They're doing on the spear. They're damage 2 on the charge. They're slightly different. I prefer the scourges, but that 20 points doesn't exist in this list, so I had to downgrade them. Which is nice. They are actually different in points because otherwise I think you just take the others all the time. But they're decent. I think we didn't talk about them a lot because they hadn't really changed. But looking at the battle line options, I think they're in the top of the choices. I think I
like the mask, easily overlooked because they're not sexy and new. They're just solid though, fast.
Yeah, and then 2 units of bliss barbs, purely bodies, range damage. They're the sort of the things that are going to get you depravity, kill stuff, shoot heroes, whatever you need to do. Sit at the back normally with the shard speaker behind your wall of defensive things. Although I haven't got a lot of chaff in this. It's very much like the fiends have to play quite a pivotal role. One thing I do have is my main units. I have my fiend star, which is only 6. You could upgrade to 9 by dropping 1 unit of bliss barb seekers.
They don't have enough things like that. It's like taking large units of monstrous cavalry. You end up not optimizing attacks too often for it to be a good idea, in my opinion. I've tried this a lot with Iron Jaws, and it's never worked out.
For me, it's just about keeping the -1 to wound buff and having a buffer for damage.
Yeah.
To keep this rather than effective damage. Now, what I've done is I've put them into bliss barb seekers, but you could make that 2 units of 6 fiends. If you didn't want the shooters, you could go, I'll have 9 fiends, 5 seekers. So there's some flexibility there. You don't have to run exactly here. Obviously, those who are astute would notice I've actually got 4 battle line units. So you could actually remove one of the archer units if you're using the seekers to give you the points to upgrade the claw spears to scourges if you're that way inclined, and then you might better swap. Exactly, you could do this. You could swap 1 unit of 11 bliss barb archers for another 5 Hellstriders and have them all with scourges. I think that works out because you're going to be 150 each. You got you'd just be a 10 over actually. But anyway, you do something like that. But fiends come on these bases. Now the reason it's good, which is the ovals, is you can do this, and then put 1 here. So you could actually get quite a lot of damage in a small space. Whereas
it's like drawing a daisy around a contact point, isn't it? Just little petals.
Because you've got a narrow point on the base, so your width of the base doesn't stop you getting more models in. So I actually think as a combat unit, they are one of the better units purely because of that base size.
Oh yeah.
So when you look at other things and you go, oh, these do technically more attacks. Yes, but you can't bring that to bear in a small area. And I think that's why a 9 of fiends I wouldn't be that worried about using, because 3 fiends actually doesn't take up a lot of space.
Yeah.
because you can form that kind of pointy triangle to get in. It does get a little bit unwieldy, but you'll be surprised. I think
you've got some high reach stuff and flexible, a variety of units within your army. There are going to be situations where, I don't know, your Hell Striders get to attack over your Fiends without being able to be hit back, or stuff like that.
If they had a 3-inch reach, if they were Scourges, yes, but those ones don't, unfortunately. So, but again, I like the Scourges for that reason. But Claw Spears in here, there is some play with this after a few games. I'll probably change it up a bit. The Fiends, -2 to hit if you're within 12 of Vaskiliev, so they need to stay near him. They can become a shield for him if they really need to, or he can be the shield for them, which is probably more likely. He's, that's a particularly resilient unit, especially when you've got the command ability to give him +1 save. So they can go up to a 4+ save. -2 to hit, -1 to wound. So the Fiends are resilient, but they're also fast. So it's unlikely you're going to be alpha striked in combat, because you can use the Hellstriders as a screen if you really need to against the enemy.
You can get quite a lot of distance covered, especially in a quarter crescent with cavalry units.
If you're worried about shooting, so you can even put them off the table and just go, well, shoot something else, because they're not there with the Lurid Haze. The Bliss Barb Seekers, now I think they're very good.
This is the mounted shooters, right?
Yeah, so the mounted shooters, so they have they have a lot of wounds, because actually they've got 4 wounds each. There's 20 wounds in each unit. Bravery's not particularly good. They get 3 shots each. I actually think they're one of those things that I think they're very easy to overlook.
I think people just don't need movement as a stat and add it up with the other abilities of something, right?
And they get run and shoot as well. So they're 14
re-rolling runs.
Re-rolling the run, because the ability, if you're near your general, which might be unlikely, is their foot slogging. But the point is that they're fast, resilient, and they can shoot. So the idea is their harassment, not particularly good in combat, but
enough wounds to weather a low. They're not going to get killed by chaff in a turn.
But they're there to generate your depravity, really, and to kill stuff, because having that much shooting in the list allows you to pick off heroes, kill units, thin them out, do the shooting. You've still got combat power, and you should rack up enough depravity to get a Keeper of Secrets by turn 2. If they, I believe you should, by the fact you've had on your second turn, you should be able to get a Keeper if you're lucky.
Got the ability to ambush them as well if needed. You could ambush them, get them to kill, rack up some depravity by shooting stuff, take some hits back, which is not unuseful when you've got 4 wounds. Yeah,
I mean they're a decent unit, again, like you say, to have in reserve. I really like them. I think they, for 180 points, they're a bargain. Definitely would take these. Just think mortal wound output, if you pop a few 6s, they're just decent, I think. So that's the first list. So that's it's got a lot of shooting, it's got some Hellstride, it's got some Fiends. Hero suite, as we talked about, is Osgilion and the 2 other heroes. And I think that's a fairly decent army.
Quite rounded. I guess you've only got 1 damage blob potential, largely, right? It's the addition of lots of Death of 1,000 Cuts apart from the Fiends, and big dude, basically.
Yeah, and it is more shooting than I probably would want to focus on. But like I say, I think if you were playing in the meta and going, actually, there's not enough damage, I'm not doing enough, then you can actually go, well, actually what I'm going to do is change the number of shooters down and increase the combat.
3 times Hellstriders, 2 times 6 Fiends, you've got some points to play with.
Yeah. For me, the idea is you summon your combat power through the depravity. So you're going to be putting on your Keeper of Secrets or your Blob of Demonettes or whatever, just to be... So it's the idea is that you've got these annoying harassment units that are all fast, you've got your core of archers that sit back, kind of like they're very squishy, but they're kind of far enough away. And you've got this one combat blob that you're going to be pushing into people. And then as the game goes on, you're going to start popping up super creatures or like keepers or secrets or, other...
it feels different sacrificing something if it's racked up a resource that kind of pays for itself anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the army itself will play quite well. I think it's a bit vulnerable to being alphaed because it doesn't have those pre-game move screens, because you do have access to things like untamed beasts. So, for example, like the Blissbarb archers could be dropped out 1 unit of 11, put in 2 units of untamed beasts, upgrade both the claw spears to hell scourges, and that's back on 2,000 points. No formations. I don't rate the formation. I don't think you need it when you've got the ability to push them back or have so many negative modifiers or protection in the first turn or put stuff off the table. I don't think you need to worry about Alpha Strike, because I think you can almost leave a bait trap of, you can come on Alpha Strike my archers, I'll leave my fiends and big man off the table, they'll come on, and then I've got a chance to double you, and then you're not gonna be able to kill them again because you've already dropped your load, so to speak.
The stuff that you're worried about as well, it might just be more drops than you anyway. It's only worth doing that type of stuff if you are, generally speaking, I don't know what the percentages, but let's say you are on average like 80% likely to be the person who's getting the choice of who goes first or second. And if the armies that you're worried about, let's say it's like 1 to 3 drop Lumineth Pew Pew list or whatever, that might just wipe you regardless, and then you've gone in that direction and it's not served you.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing you've talked about. The opponent has to make the choice, right? So I know that I've got loads of drops, but I've got that after deployment. I can remove something.
Makes such a big difference.
And then make my opponent go, oh, hang on, I didn't realise that. I've left a gap. I need to now go first, but I couldn't quite reach you anyway. I can't risk you rolling that charge, and you've just immediately negated their advantage of having a lower drop count. So I think it's the manipulation you can do off the table psychologically with this is quite high.
It's D3 as well. What if you get D3? What if 3 units?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, put both your Seekers and your Fiends off the table, and you're like, oh, what am I going to do now? So personally, I like it. I think it's pretty cool. You do have a way to get the locus in. It's fine. I mean, that for me, I like aesthetically, I think it would look good as well, which is important to me.
Lots of different heights and base sizes and stuff like that.
So
moving on.
Yeah, well, I'm going to skip over a list because I've got another Lurid Haze one, and because it's a bit more continuity is better, right? To talk about that.
Cool.
So this one, I was trying to use the combat units in Battle Line, which you already spoke about, and I was trying to get Sigvald into a list. Now, personally, I don't think Sigvald's worth the price tag. I need to play with him because I'm sure that he'll have games where he goes crazy. But I figured, why not have him? Just because I know people out there want to run him, want to know how to run a list with him, get some ideas. So, again, big man's in the list. He's in every list. I'm sorry, people out there, and I've got a soft spot for him because it's a fat model. You don't get many of those in Age of Sigmar, so it makes me feel represented. I know that's a thing, right, on the internet. So all the reasons I spoke about, these are there. The Shard Speaker, again, I think is so good. You're going to have it in every list. I love the Shard Speaker. It's so good. Lord of Pain is the general. Now, the reason for that is it makes the Twin Souls battle line. Then you get your, again, he's got the extra wound. He's got the command ability. Sigvald, he doesn't do anything for your army. Like, he is just...
He's not a synergy piece, is he?
No, he's just awesome for himself. And that's kind of cool, right? But obviously, having the charge add 3 to charge rolls and his attacks, and then the wounds can't be negated, and he's got a 4 up ignore, he's got 6 wounds, he's got 3+ armor save. Command ability, give him a 2+ save in this one, because you've got access to that command ability, so he can in a combat phase have a 2+ save, makes him way more resilient. He also fights at the start of the combat phase if he charges, so it's really good, especially if you summon a keeper, he can go again, because when it's your chance to pick. So if you charge him in, fight. If you've popped a big number on his charge as well, you'll be rubbing your hands together. Then
you've got Feverish Anticipation in there as well this time, so there's a good chance that you get the run in there already. He's going to be quite easy to get into nice positions if you do get that big charge.
Yeah, and if he charges in, you roll the big number. He fights first, go into your normal activation sequence. You then can activate him again with the command ability from the Keeper of Secrets if you've got one. You summoned one. There's no one in the list, but you can always summon one. So he could be absolutely amazing for churning through things like Hagnar Witch Elves, because they don't get an armor save, they don't get an after save. He's doing D3 damage each. You pop like an 11 on the dice of a charge. You're like, right, well, I'm 11 attacks, 2s to hit, re-rolling 1s. 3s could be 2s if you've debuffed them. So you're like 2s and 2s, Ren 2, damage D3 each, going twice, 2+ armor save. So
he's
don't sleep
going to garner some attention, isn't he? He's really, like, people are going to underestimate him to the point where they don't, and then they're going to rush to deal with him.
Yeah, and like even like Mortek Guard, he'll go in and just absolutely. I know, like I've been speaking to Matt Leons a lot, and he loves Sigvald, and he's like he's just thinking all these scenarios, these perfect storms where he goes in like a boss, and I think that he's potentially amazing. So great model. Why not include him? You're getting something that's fairly resilient. Very fast to charge, which is nice because it's a very reliable charge. Again, you can put him off the table. He gets +3 to charge. You're 9 away. Only need a 6.
Right.
So he becomes quite a nasty prospect in Lurid Haze.
And he's a character, isn't he? So either using a point for reroll 1s to hit, which is sexy AF on him, or rerolling to make that charge in having gone off table is both of those are. Like that's a bargain of a CP there. In
Invaders, he's a hero. You can make him a general, so in addition to your other general. So in my list, he's a general again. So I've got 2 generals, and again, depravity generation. If you're in their territory, he also, if he dies, you get a command point. So that's a 50-point thing you get back. It kind of offsets his cost.
Yeah, good think indeed.
I mean, and the thing is, on turn 1, he can be magnificent and in their army being a right pain in the ass.
Love stuff
and
like
and that's a lot of fun for me. So I was trying to think, how do I get the most out of this model? And I think in this, there is some argument for pretenders with him, but because he can't be the general and get all the traits, he doesn't really get the benefit you get from being in Invaders, because the stuff about Lurid Haze and the command ability you don't need, they're not traits, you just get them. But Sigvald is great, and you get to use him. He'll be a pain. Every game, he might be the one unit you drop off every game, and your opponent's just going to be like, oh my god, what's Sigvald going to do? When's he going to show up? And you just imagine him like rocking in like a hurricane once he's done his makeup and hair. Like a bit like Gene Simmons coming in from the sky, just coming in for his solo for 20 minutes, and I love the idea of that. So he's in there. Now, I looked at the Myrmidon. Now, I love the Myrmidon models, and I was like, right, I'll take 10 Myrmidons and 300 points. And what are they actually doing? They're defensive. They're there to be a block that sticks around. Now, I know people will look at this and go, but they do damage. Yes, they do, but Chaos Warriors are probably one of the best defensive units in Chaos.
Well-rounded defensive units at that, right?
Well, with 15 Chaos Warriors, you get 30 wounds with 4 up save. You can re-roll, and you get a mortal wound save.
Plus, isn't it?
5 up. So they still get 2 attacks. They're still freeze and free. Yeah, they don't have the rend, they don't do mortal wounds. But actually, yeah, you can't use the Lord of Pain on them. They're not a head knight unit. Do you care? No, because your command points, you're not going to be using it on that. But you can make them +1 save because the command ability. Because they are still Slaanesh. They're still in your army as part of your army. They are free up armor save re-rolling. I can't really fault that.
Also, if you're against people who don't have rend,
and
just re-rolling ones would be good enough on them most of the time. Never mind re-rolling everything.
No, exactly. So for me, like Chaos Warriors, awesome. Get to use the cool models. You can convert them with the bits from the twin souls you make, and then the bits left over go on to the warriors. You put the shields on because you get the spare shields. Who knows?
Helps justify the price tag on those the fancy ones.
I don't care. I bought it all. I'm such a simp. So you've got your Chaos Warriors as your core block of defensive unit that's going to be there, going to stick around. It's going to be a pain. With Fat Man, they're -1 to hit, 3 up rerollable with a command point, 5 up mortal wound save. Thanks very much. Thanks for coming. Twin Salts. Now, these are damage darts. They're battle line. Now, the reason the Lord of Pain's in there, it makes those battle line. I did think maybe they're just better off being archers, and you don't need the Lord of Pain. And then you don't need the Bliss Barb Seekers. They could be the combat ones, or they could be a unit of 6 fiends. Then I kind of felt I'm going back
right in the previous list.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. And I think for me, I wanted to make sure I tried to keep it different.
You do also get the option to put them off table and run them at people. You know, you could put Sigvald and 5 of them off table. You can make them re-roll their charge. He's at +3, and then you could run a dude and 5 resilient and flexible dudes into a corner of your opponent's army and really screw with their game plan. They got to pay attention to that.
Yeah, and I think as well, the Twin Souls, you can put them behind the warriors. They've got 2-inch reach. So you could set up this phalanx. If your warrior block in a line with little side bits, like this, like a little bracket.
Yeah.
And in the bracket, put your 2 units of 5 Twin Souls. It becomes a wall that you can push up the table, which is something you don't have normally with Slaanesh. You could put Glutos behind that wall in the middle. So you put Glutos in the middle, warriors in a line, Twin Souls either side.
Yeah, you could also put him to the side and just anchor a flank with, And
then your Lord of Pain's got a 2-inch reach, so he can go on one of those sides. You've got the command ability there. So you've immediately got this block of awesome combat power that you can march up the table, which is something Slaanesh never really had. They didn't have this armored wall. And if you need to break out, you can move the warriors into more of a block, and then the 2 units of Twin Souls can then move and charge out because they've got the 8-inch move. They're very good. They're very quick.
They are fast troops, aren't they?
Yeah, and for me, I thought about it, and I thought about the Myrmidons, and the more I thought about the Myrmidons, the more I thought, actually, do you just take warriors? And I think you do. I'm sure that the Myrmidons might actually be a better combat unit than the Twin Souls, but that's another discussion. They get a rerollable save as well, but they don't get the after save. Chaos Warriors, they're just solid for 90
They're
points.
not exciting, but it doesn't mean they're not good, right?
They get me excited, but I'm weird. So
I think, and the internet's already. Well, I hope that most of all out of that list, people took away the fact that you said it's all about having fun, being pain in the butt. Which I believe is very appropriate with Slaanesh. But, there's a reason why the internet are talking about points being, and they probably are. The army isn't crazy efficiently pointed, and when you're getting 5 guys for 170 points, it's the type of thing that makes you question where they could go otherwise.
Yeah, and the Twin Souls, they could be fairly resilient. They got a 4-up save. You can get a 5-up ignore if you've not done because you've got to switch your ability every turn. So. They re-roll hit rolls, or they can get a 5-up after. So, depending on what you're fighting, you've got that flexibility as well.
Oh, cool as well, right? It's just cool.
Yeah. And then obviously, the Lord of Pain can use his command ability on them, so they can reroll hit rolls. So if you've done the turn where you go in to fight, you go, I'm going to get my 5 up after, but I'm going to use my command ability to give me reroll hits. That means, I know people have said, oh, they're not worth taking with him because you could get that ability anyway. And it's like, yeah, but you can't get it every turn. You have to alternate. And you can't have both, whereas he lets you have both.
So wait to either double down in one instance or extend the period at which, 2 turns of being damaging.
And he's got a 4 up armor save and a 5 up after save as well. So you've got the Warriors have got a 5 up mortal save. He's got a 5 up after save. Glutos can have a 5 up after save. The Twin Souls can have a 5 up after save. You're a -1 to hit bubble. Do you notice how they like Nurgle?
Yeah,
but they're fast.
You just described my old Death Army, actually.
Well, this is why the book appeals to me so much, honestly.
Yeah, I'm loving it. I'm all over this. Like fast-moving dart blobs of debuff, joy, and flexible irritation for your opponent. Like, sign me up.
Yeah, and because I think I haven't got the shooters in the core, got to have them in the Bliss Barb Seekers, in there for the same reasons. Now, the other thing I've been able to do is I've been able to squeeze a unit of Untamed Beasts in. Now, this is your extra level of Alpha Strike protection because they're the screen and they get to move pre-game to block, push them further back. So if you need to get more depth in your deployment zone, they're good at that. I have to play some games because you might actually find that you're better off taking an endless spell like Life Swarm, having 20 points under for a Triumph, or something else, or using those points to upgrade one of the units. Now, I think the Chaos Warriors, like the thing is, well, like if you had 10 Myrmidons, they are 300 points. You've got 5 less models. That's 10 less wounds. So I just can't look past Chaos Warriors instead of Myrmidons. Yeah. Twin Souls.
A block of Chaos Warriors with a Triumph is nice. I can see that. Like any list I have, if I've either got a dragon type thing / large monster or a blob, and I don't tend to have more than one big blob, but if you've got one blob in there that is good in multiple ways, getting reroll saves on them, slightly redundant, but that they would wear Triumphs beautifully as a unit, as well as command abilities.
And you could even go for Knights and take a Chaos Sorcerer, because you could use Oracular Visions to give them reroll saves.
That's tasty.
And you've got Demonic Power to power them up.
Is the Sorcerer marked Slaanesh?
Yes, you choose a mark when you buy him. So
you can drop both of those. If you rolled 2 units, you could drop him and them in front of your opponent and be very, very worried.
You wouldn't want to do it because you need the buff phase and the hero phase, so you want them on the table. But
you want on table.
I think you're going to be putting Sigvald off and maybe a unit of Bliss Barb Seekers.
Yeah.
But like the options you get from playing Lurid Haze is very strong because it gives you that X factor with the deployment. I think Sigvald fits in this list really nicely.
Oh, it does.
You've got
even if he's if he's 30 or 40 points too much, that's still pretty tasty in that situation, isn't it?
I'd be interested to see his output if he outputs the same as what you could get for 260 points in another unit, because you're probably not far off. Really, what he can churn out.
He's got quite consistent stats, hasn't he? And
I think
until he's been debuffed.
Damage D3 is a bit sketch.
Yeah,
but that's good as well because it can spike both ways, right? You can underspike or overspike. So
yep.
So that's the second list. Third list, but technically second one, and that's with Sigvald using the Twin Souls. Again, you'll notice there's always a theme. I want to have at least 2 units of shootings. I want to have some way to get depravity at range. I want some way to
if you're not
myself.
Making the most of that, you should, unless you picked it purely on the models, there's other armies you could pick that do what you're trying to do better, right?
No, exactly.
And you may as well make the most of your core principle as a unique army.
Exactly. So for me, this is definitely a list I want to try out. You could upgrade those Seekers to the combat ones if you wanted more combat power. You could change Twin Souls down to Hellstriders, then you wouldn't need the Lord of Pain, and then you could change him out for a different character or something like that. So there are some options.
Put the mask in and just double down on, irritation darts. It's cool. Like What base sizes of these models we're talking about dropping off? What size is Sigvald? What size is the mass?
Sigvald's on a 60mm round.
Okay, not too big.
Or 62mm round, I should say, because although it says 60mm, it's actually 62. Not like I cut out a base topper for it that's now 2mm too small. But it's fine because he's got a scenic base that covers it all anyway, so I just put sand on it. It's fine. I'm not bitter, honest. I went like that and went, it doesn't fit.
Well, at least they didn't take you ages to build or anything.
No, sure. So Lord of Pain's on a 40, Shard Speaker's on a 32. Oscar, I don't know what Glute's. He's on a big base. He's on a bigger than a chariot base, I think. And then
and the mask is going to be 40 or less, I imagine.
32. 32 for the mask.
Oh, that's so annoying for people.
Warriors. Yeah, exactly.
Sneaky.
And the Bliss Barbs come on these slightly bigger cav bases. Untamed beasts are a mix, depending on what they are.
Yeah.
But sort of between 28 and 38 and 40.
No, I like the things that you could drop being, when they are like 50 or less in particular. That's the point at which your charges can sneak.
That's the thing about units. Like when they try and block off their deployment zone, if they've left a 32mm gap, you're like, the mask could just fit in that gap and be like, hey, I'm here.
Any excuse that model as well. I love the idea of you having Sigvald. It's like they're on a catwalk, isn't it? Which I guess is appropriate. Just got like the most stylish models released. And then Fatty go off and annoy them. I'm hungry.
No, exactly. And then the last list, before I go into it, I'm gonna talk about the Faultless Blades, which is another Wrath of the Everchosen.
Can you not tell us about your living whip?
I will tell you all about the living whip because it's important. So
right, let's go.
This is I wanted to run a list a bit more demon centric. I did look at Celeste and I did look at trying to put more demons in. I just always end up with Immortals, and I think that's because I like them, I prefer them, and I think it's I think they do more than the demons do.
Automatically resilient as well, right? They don't need help to be tough.
I was speaking to Mike Wilson, who's played a lot of Slaanesh in a day before the Hedonites book, even before that, and he plays a lot of demons. He's got a lot of it. He's been frantically building all his new stuff. But he said that he's coming up with some Godseeker demon lists around the chariots as core and seekers, and so I think there's definitely some lists there. The mortal wound output on the chariots in particular is actually quite good because you can double down on it because it happens at the end of the charge and at the combat phase, so then you can locus stop them piling in, you can mitigate the damage. I just haven't had time to digest it, and honestly, you wouldn't build them. I'm not going to build them, so it might be the best thing in the world, but I ain't going to do it. So and this is,
I've got a couple you can have.
I've got loads.
They're built.
Everyone. Oh, okay, that's different. I might take you up on that. So people are like, it's weird you building models for me. No, so don't take this as these are the only options. These are just the options that I spent a good 4 or 5 hours today reading everything, thinking, coming up with ideas. So these are my initial thoughts, and I'm sure when I play some games, all those, when you get into contact with the real world, with the meta, that's when you start going, actually, I need Be'lakor because I can't deal with this one thing. He's the X factor, or
you just get on table and your army looks small, or it doesn't feel as small as you thought it would, or stuff. You don't know that until.
Can I block off my deployment zone? Have I got enough stuff? Do I get enough depravity? How do I get more depravity? Stuff like that. So this list is a little bit more tricksy. So this is a little bit more what I would call tricky, and a little more focused on the pretenders because I know they were popular before. So I looked at the Wrath. I don't like the Godseeker one. I just looked at it. I went, I don't really like it. Godseekers I know were the go-to before, but I'm not a big fan. Anyway, so Faultless Blades. So what you get with this? So you get an ability called Send Me Your Best. So you get +1 to hit with melee weapons if one of your units targets a hero and they charged. So if you're playing against someone who's got a lot of heroes, or you're fighting heroes, you get +1 to hit against heroes when you charge them. So that's just a flat rule across your army. Pretty good.
Yeah. Quite specific, but a nice bonus to have in the bag.
Yeah, but you think about like anything on like like Vampire Lord, Zombie Dragon, or Cauldron, or Marathi, or Sons of Bear, Mega Gargan, or they're all heroes. So
it also means you can send like crappy things into a wizard on foot, and there's much less of a chance that it survives on 2 or 3 wounds.
Yeah,
but like you could put, whatever it is.
It makes your units that are good at getting around the sides, like your Hellstriders, Seekers, they can charge that hero and reliably kill it.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So
big difference.
It's a free ability, so like you just get it extra. So yeah, you have to take the command trait and the artifact, but you can take 2 command traits in Pretenders, and they're good, so you're not bothered. You get this command ability. Now this is the one, I think this is awesome. Okay, so you use this once per turn in the combat phase. You pick a Pretender's Host unit wholly within 12 of a Pretender's Host hero. Then the first 2 wounds you allocate to that model are negated.
Oh.
Or that unit. So that gives you a 2 wound buffer on a unit, on Sigvald, on a Keeper, on Glutus, on anything. So that is amazing.
If anyone has played against the Mortek, what's the horsey man who's just
the
negates 1 wound a phase? He just survives for forever. Like it's just flat negation of that type is very, very uncommon. The thing
about those wounds is they are wounds after everything. So they're after your after saves, after your armor saves. So they are potentially, that could be 30 attacks negated.
Yeah.
Depending what your defense's stats are, what their hits and wounds rolls are. Yeah. So, you might roll a bundle of attacks, get through the 3-up armor save and the 5-up after save. Oh, I've done 3 wounds. No, you've done 1 wound.
Yeah.
Massive. It's huge.
So you can almost guarantee someone's not going to tick down a bracket in the case of Glutus or the Keeper Secrets or something like that. Like that is legit.
Yeah, and I think Armor of Arrogance, it sounds amazing. It's how I live my life. So just wrap yourself in self-belief and believe hammer. So I love it. That you get the trait that you have to take. In addition, he gets 2 on your general in Pretenders, and it basically means that units that start a pile in within 12 can move an extra 3 when they pile in. So it's okay. Like you get to a 6-inch pile in rather than a 3-inch, or if you've got the mask, it's 9 inches rather than 6, which could be quite lucrative depending on what you're doing.
If you've charged something with 2 units and wiped it out, that second unit just gets to like
that's the strength. That's the strength of it. It's the when you double charge a screen,
it's the cascade charge,
and then you get to pile in 6 rather than 3. So for me,
9 with a tiny base
because it's from your general. You still get another command trait because that's just 1. Then you get the artifact, which is Contemptuous Brand. Pick 1 melee weapon, get +1 to wound that targets a hero. Can't complain at that. That's just good. Like
it's not attack.
Flat good. So in Pretenders, in the command traits, you get different ones, but I've gone with Monarch of Lies. So it says at the start of the combat phase, pick an enemy hero within 3, subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks made by that hero.
Right.
So it's an extra -1. You could go for Strength of Godhood to get +1 damage. You could go for Strongest Alone, but I don't think you're going to be on there. You could get Hunter of God Beast, which is +1 damage against monsters. So you might take that one. So they're all pretty good. Like there's one that's reroll Battle Shock if you're within 9 of that general. There's one that means extra models flee. I like the Monarch of Lies. It's only because I've gone full, as you'd affectionately call, blue-black knobhead. So this list
should we explain the concept of blue-black knobhead?
You can explain.
To people who haven't played. All right, so if anyone's played Magic the Gathering, black are like evil and blue are magic, and blue won't kill you, but they'll like put you back in your opponent's hand and stuff like that and just screw with you and slow you down and like advantage you on the board, so to speak. And then combining that with black is just like negation, 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 and then before you realise that you've lost because you didn't win.
It's that control. It's all about control. So
Yeah.
so I've gone for the Pretender's Host in there. So I've still got the big man. All the reasons we said, -1 to hit bubble. Can't look past it. Shard Speaker, which again is for the abilities. Now I will get my book and do it, because I clicked the X on my War Scroll, which was very professional of me. But I want to make sure I do actually explain how good the Shard Speaker is. So
it's 150 points. What do you get for that?
Well, it's a wizard, so immediately good. If you cast a spell, you get +2 to save, so it gets a 3-up save rather than the 5-up. It's got 5 wounds, so it's fairly squishy, 6-inch move. But once per turn you're shooting phase, you can pick an enemy unit within 9. So that's after you've moved and run. So you can move up the table, then hit a unit with it. So it's actually quite a long range. On a 3+, you get to add 1 to wound rolls that target the unit.
Nice.
In the combat phase. So
if he's ran, it means he can't charge. He could also be piling in an extra whatever in this as well.
You
which is
don't
quite
still
cool.
need to be within 3 to pile in, which is doesn't give you that second bit, which makes it juicy.
Oh.
But you also have the Reflection Eternal spell, which is on a 6, enemy unit within 12, subtract 1 from wound rolls made by that unit. So they get -1 to wound, or you get +1 to wound if you're within 9 and you've rolled a 3-up. So
the Slaanesh stuff's short, but it's stuff like there's not many that your opponent really, really wouldn't want to stop.
No, and like I like those two spells, like those two abilities. One's an ability, one's a spell. Mm-hmm. It's just a decent model. I just like it. Gives you. I've taken Battle Rapture, which is the Battle Shock immunity, 1 unit, or if you roll a 10 or more D3 units. So it's a command point saving, basically, because you need it. You don't want command points in this list. Which is, I haven't bought any extra, so you're not going to have many, but you just need to be very, very conservative with them. So I got the Keeper of Secrets. Now, Keeper of Secrets, I went, obviously, for, you've got the Contest of Cruelty and the Contemptuous Brand and Monarch of Lies, and it's got the spell Born of Damnation. Now, Born of Damnation allows you to heal D3 wounds on any Slaanesh hero, whereas the Progeny of Damnation, which is the Greater Demon spell, only allows you to heal demons. So I took the lower level one, because the other one does D3 or D6. This one does D3. So I took the lower level one because I'd rather have the ability to heal the Shard Speaker or Glutus than not. So
yeah.
Now the Keeper itself, so we didn't really touch it in the show, but there's some little changes that are important. So the Living Whip is a shooting attack, so immediately it gives you a way to generate depravity if you need to, like, just chip a wound or something off something at range. It's only 6
range, is it?
6.
Okay.
But it's okay. Freeze and freeze, 1 rend, 1 damage, 1 attack. So it's just like, I'll just ping that model before I charge this thing. So if that's going to give me a depravity before I charge something else, if you get it. So it's okay. But the main reason to take the Living Whip is that at the start of the combat phase, pick an enemy monster within 6, and roll a dice. On a 3-up, pick 1 melee weapon, subtract 1 from hit rolls. So you're -1 to hit because you've got the Osgiliath, the Gluteus Lord bubble. You've got -1 to hit because the whip. And you've got the other ability, which is a hero from the Pretender's Contempt command trait, which is -1 to hit. So if you've got a monstrous hero and that you've got Glutos within 12 and you use both these abilities on them, they are going to be -3 to hit you.
That's a good way to keep a secret. Keep a Keeper of Secrets alive, right?
Yeah. Plus you could then make them ignore the first 2 wounds you suffer.
And then you can maybe heal him.
And you can maybe heal him.
I like that.
So the Living Whip, it may not be the best choice, but I think it's quite cool because, especially if you're playing against like Sons of Behemat or Archeon or Alariel or Nagash or someone, and we spoke about the show, the Keeper can't go in and fight twice because it's going to die before it strikes it. And actually it's within 6, so you don't even need to, it's not even subtract 1 when you hit the keeper. It's just subtract 1. So you can whip someone who's not within 3 of you, but is hitting
pinned.
something else to give it. And I just think that an extra -1 to hit is more important than a heal, a 6-up ignore, or some mortal wounds after the fact.
Stopping stuff before it matters, right?
Yeah.
Let's just stop it now. Let's not let things escalate. Let's just no.
Yeah, and it's you also got the. It also means that if you use Dark Temptations, which is optional, but you can pick a hero, and if they refuse the challenge, they take D3 mortals. If they accept, they get +1 to hit, but next turn on a 4+ they die. So you could go, well, I'm not bothered without getting +1 to hit because they're already at -3 or whatever. So actually, I'm gonna tempt you anyway. Because you're probably just gonna take the wounds, right? I mean, most people will. So he's in there for that. Now, yeah, you could go for Strength of Godhood or other stuff. I don't know. I just got like that. So he's got obviously the command ability to fight again for a Hedonite unit. So you can go in, fight, and then when you get to activate again, you can activate the same model again. So he's good for that. Choir as well. So you could do an AoE mortal wound spell. He gets to cast 2 spells. Now, I quite like the fact you've got Glutos can get 2, the Keeper can get 2. You've got quite a lot of magic in this list. You've got 5 casts, so it gives you the ability to get off your endless spells, which I have 2 in this list.
Yeah.
So you can play around with what trait you take, but the artifact and the other trait are fixed. So I just thought I'd lean into those.
I think it's nice that your summoning is going to go straight away, not on a keeper, because you have one, right? That is a thing, because that's going to be the default. You want him down as soon as possible, probably, generally speaking, not in every situation, but you want him down as soon as possible to get access to the ability to attack twice with a single unit. He's already on the table, so, in that case, you could just be like pooping out tens of demonettes for board position, or making screens, or dropping ranged things, or dropping a chariot. Your first investment that you're gonna want to do, he's already down, and that means that you might get to summon immediately twice rather than waiting and building up to something that's slightly bigger. I think that's going to make more of a difference on the table than it does on paper than people would think.
No, exactly, and I think the having your keeper in your starting list means you give it artifacts and traits, and with pretenders, it makes him a lot more effective. But he's an anti-hero piece, so anti-monstrous hero. He's your guy for that job. So that's why I've lent into that. Battle line is 15 Chaos Warriors for all the reasons I've spoken about. Just great. And 2 units of Bliss Barb Archers. Again, need the archers to get some damage out there. Now, I've actually gone for combat unit is 6 Fiends. Now, again, they are... The other thing I should say about the Keeper, it does have a 3-inch reach and a 2-inch reach on its blade. So you can actually stick him behind the Chaos Warriors.
Ooh.
And he becomes... Although you can't make the Chaos Warriors fight twice because they're not Hedonites, he does have a... it does protect him even more. And if they put a big monster into your Chaos Warrior block, you can actually whip the guy over the top to reduce the hit rolls of their weapon, whichever weapon it is that you're worried about.
The most worried about, yeah.
And, again, against Sons of Behemoth, that's going to be a real pain. Like, you're -1 to hit anyway because you're within range of Glutos, then you're an extra -1 for the whip.
Against the entire destruction book. That's army. That's a pain.
And I actually think you're almost getting all the stuff Nurgle gets. Ignore the first 2 wounds, after saves, minuses to hit, minuses to wound, and you're also getting the speed and you're getting the damage. I think it's almost like Nurgle plus the Slaanesh book.
We've even got a fair amount of mortal wound protection kicking about, whether it's full ignores or 5 output against mortals or other stuff like that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and the reason I'm leaning into defense, which might seem a bit strange, is the more likely that people are to leave you alive with a wound or two and give you a depravity point. So that's why you want to die slow. You want to savor the experience of getting killed with Slaanesh, enjoy it, and get yourself more depravity. You know, the longer it lasts, the better. So I've been told. So that's how it is. So you then, I've got my fiends in there now. You could change these out to another unit. Like, you could even go for 10 of the combat seekers, but you need to find 40 points. Now, the reason I say 10 is I believe, let me double check this. I don't have it. I was trying to find it and I thought, maybe I'm getting it wrong. You do get a bonus for units of 10 or more models in Pretenders.
You can always drop out one of the spells if you need to wiggle some points there.
I believe you do. I might have that wrong.
Let us know below.
So, no, okay. So, yeah, I did read something, but it might just be the.
Tell you what, Russ is imagining in the comment.
It might be a Godseeker thing. Anyway, but anyway, so you could run that unit of fiends. Could be any combat unit you want. It could be 2 units of Blissbarb Seekers, and then the archers could be different core. Again, the core you're a little bit restricted because for 150 point like Myrmidons, they just don't do what they do. They could be Chaos Knights, which wouldn't be a bad choice.
I guess you want to keep something as demons rather than mortals, right? Because of your potential abilities.
It doesn't really matter because the ability is Hedonite unit, so from the keeper.
Oh, okay.
So it doesn't matter. The reason I like the fiends is because you get the double minus to hit, minus to wound. So -2 to hit, -1 to wound with a 6 unit. They're quite fast and they do quite a lot of damage. I think they're one of those things that can spike.
Multiple wounds a model as well, which again links into depravity.
Yeah. There's a lot of wounds in there. So, but I mean, you get more wounds for the Seekers. So those 6 fiends could be 2 units of 5 Blissbarb Seekers. So because you get 20 wounds a unit rather than for 3.
The list changes hugely, doesn't it? One swap completely changes the personality of this list.
Yeah, and I think most lists you've got that 360 point unit that can be swapped around to whatever you want it to be. Could be another keeper if you really wanted to. I mean, it's no.
People have that army kicking about, that's for sure, without the fiends.
Maybe, but that's. So I think like Glutos is basically, for me in my head, he's like the keeper of secrets. He is another one, but he's just does a different job. I mean, even Shalaxi is a good choice if you want a keeper that isn't you're not going to give artifacts to anyway. You might as well be Shalaxi. You've got
you just rounded it out with Untamed Beasts.
Yeah, little screen. Now, one of the things I've got in this list, which is a little bit interesting, is the Life Swarm and the Burning Head. Now, the reason they're in is obviously, the Burning Head gives me a way to do damage to my units to give me depravity. So it does D3 mortal wounds. Now, the important thing about this is I can summon it and not hurt myself, but get the Wrathful Aura, which is reroll hit rolls of 1 for attacks made by units where they're wholly within 9 of the model.
All right.
Now, the reason that's good is because it doesn't say combat.
Okay,
so
that's really good.
It buffs the shooting, so what I can do is ping a unit, do the damage, which I know will give me depravity. This is why I think the Blissbarb Seekers might be better than the Fiends. So you hit them, you're not going to kill one because they've got 4 wounds each, you do D3 mortals. You can then heal them with the Life Swarm, because you've got that as well. And you're able to get reroll 1s on all your shooting if you stay compact.
Yep, and they got pretty decent range, haven't they? So that should be
18
doable.
inches, so it's okay. Obviously, it is predatory, so your opponent could use it to mess around with you.
At the same time, they're going to be giving you depravity. Yeah.
So it's okay, and I think it's one of those spells. It's quite cheap. It's just, I think it's decent. You could do mortals with it, and it can be every unit as well. So you could actually use it aggressively against your opponent, ping some wound mortals on them, put it, and then use it to buff your troops. to get reroll hit rolls of 1. Now, obviously, this does mean that if you're stacking the minuses to hit and they get this buff as well, then you're negating you're giving them an option to reroll. So it's not. Maybe it's something you need to think about whether you want to use it or where you put it. You need to be a little bit careful.
Flexible option. You can put it out, let it do its thing, and then get rid of it. Right? Is that doable?
You can. It's not. I wouldn't say it's
bit of a waste of your spells.
Yeah, I mean, it might be that you summon a what's it called, the Enrapturous, because she gets to unbind, dispel, and end the spell for free.
Okay, yeah.
And then she does a ranged attack. So when you start getting your depravity ticking, she might be one of the options you come in fairly early on. You can give up a cast to do it if you want, but you can't. You'd have to be the next turn. So the Emerald Life Swarm, again, it's a predatory spell, and this offsets the negatives of the other one, because if they move that, you're going to move the Life Swarm, and they might go, actually, I don't want you moving the Life Swarm because I don't want you healing that model, so I'm going to move the Life Swarm, and then you get to move the Burning Head anyway.
Okay, so use them as a pair, kind of a potential pair.
And then what this does is it heals, so after it's moved, pick 1 unit in 1 inch, heal D3 wounds, or if no wounds, you can return slain models to a combined wound characteristic equal to less for the D3. So you could put archers back in, you can heal your heroes. Pretty good. It's just a nice healing spell. For me, it's one of those things that allows you to ping damage on and then heal it off later on. Use the feign, take your wound, heal it off later on. You won't get the depravity if you've healed because it's in the battle shock phase when you do that. But the point is that you move this between rounds as well. So I believe that, forgetting the first time you summon it, but when it's already on the table, if you've had your turn battle shock phase, you've been hurt, you get your depravity, then it goes into the start of the battle round, you get to move this, you get to heal. You've already got the depravity and you've healed the wound off.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
Potential blockers as well, you can anchor a flank if you're desperate, or stop people from reaching an objective, something like that.
Yeah, and it's okay. I mean, you might find once you've played a few games that you just go, it's just a waste of 80 points. And
could be just swap them out for a second unit of Untamed Beasts, or upgrade a different unit or something.
Yeah, or use 40 points to upgrade the fiends to those Blissbarb Seekers, the Slick Blade Seekers, whatever they're called.
You could keep Burning Head, drop the Life Swarm, upgrade those, and then have 1918 be more likely to get Triumph.
Yeah, there's some options. I mean,
all
these lists you'll have to play games and then figure out, is it working? Is it fun? Does it work? What's the meta? Do I need to shift certain things around? If there's loads of shooting, you might want Palisading instead of Head, just to protect you from shooting.
Yeah, not that cool.
Or something like it's another -1 to hit.
That's another thing where your opponent doesn't want to give you first, potentially, because you get the opportunity to just set that up and
and I think it's got a dazzling -1 to hit thing as well, so you can get another minus to hit if you want it. So
because you're low on the mic.
Because you just because. But being able to go into like Archon and being -3 to hit with your keeper, he's going to go in, he's going to get to fight multiple times, he's going to go around churning those monstrous heroes up. It's very in keeping with what Pretenders is all about. Personally, I quite like that, the feeling of that super keeper, but in an army that's shooting is buffed, has some options.
Definitely this is going to be a playing man's army, isn't it? This is a techie toolbox.
That's why I like it, and that's why I think it will be underestimated, because as the game moves on and as people, you've got the flexibility, I think, in the army to lean into the strength, because there are different things.
There's also the ceilings of practice, right? You practice more and more and more with like a one-dimensional army. I've done that with Bone Splitters. I got worse as a player. Worse. Better with this, but worse. Less flexible. Whereas you're practicing with this great big weird into synapse, whatever it is, coherency list, and you're just going to get better and better and better and better and better, and your opponents probably are not going to get better and better and better against beating it because it's a weird list and it's an army that probably isn't going to be taken as widely.
Yeah, and I think once you get into that meta shift, when people are taking different things, like more shooting comes in, and this is why I think the Slaves book's got so many strengths, because you've got those Untamed Beasts, and because you've got the Be'lakor, and you've got the reduced charges, and you've got all the flexibility of the Books of Chaos. I'm pretty sure there's going to be something you can do to mitigate the strength in the meta. It's not going to be a complete one-sided counter, but this list, what I like about the Slaanesh, it has its own niche, which is in a way its way of messing with your opponent, and every time I write a list, what I'm trying to do is prolong the survivability of my units.
You get better the longer the game goes.
Yeah.
And the more you can have buffs up and stuff like that. And the way to beat Slaanesh historically has been to just screw them as fast as possible before they can start levering that advantage.
I think the old book's just completely different to this. I mean,
it's completely.
You would just go in and go, "Can I kill all the heroes and stop them summoning?"
Did that? Yeah, I played. It was prevalent when I was playing Bone Splitters. That was all I did, was target priority it.
Ironically, the shoot all the heroes meme was how you beat them. But now I think they're a very different animal. And I really like.
Undoubtedly, the strongest thing is still, if you're your worst nightmare is going to be KO and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, but I think with the old book it was auto lose, whereas now, even like Sigvald just running amok. You've even got the command ability to ignore the first 2 wounds. If you're like, he's going to try and kill us, Gluteus in 1 round, drop down and kill him. You've pushed him back anyway. You can even put him off the table if you're playing.
I was going to say that if you're playing off tables, it's very, very powerful for that.
Or you can go, well, actually, I'll just ignore the first 2 wounds. I've used my Untamed Beast to push you back so you can't get much in range. If you don't kill him, I've got an awful lot of stuff on the table that can get into you and do a lot of damage.
Mm-hmm. And if they didn't kill anything, then they give you depravity as well.
Yeah. And do you kill the keeper, or do you kill Gluteus, or do you kill where do you
target saturation?
Do you shoot the fiends?
Protection.
So there's a lot of wounds. I mean, that list has got 122 wounds. The wounds might be a little bit off because War Scroll Builder doesn't actually have any of the bliss barbs on it, so I've had to manually do it, which is why I haven't just got it on a web page, which is a bit annoying. But so I would say that you've got the ability to mitigate that shooting drop. Even Be'lakor, if you've got him, you can just go, actually, I'll just stop that unit.
Yeah.
So if you've added him, I've intentionally not put Be'lakor in my list because I just figured it's nice to not
people know what he does.
Put him in, and just to see but I think it infinitely makes the list stronger. I think he's only 240.
Yeah, he is.
So it's not hard to find 240 points in the list. Obviously, Sigvald's almost a direct swap for Be'lakor in that other list. But I like Sigvald in that list, so it's just up to people what they want to do. But I think Slaanesh, super good book. I know a lot of people are down on it on the internet. I think the reason it seems expensive is you will, throughout the game, get a lot of free stuff.
A flexible free stuff as well. And it's not restrictive summoning either. It's pretty open summoning potential.
Yeah, I mean, you've got 12 inches of the Fane and 12 inches of your heroes for your depravity summoning. I think you only do 1 unit a turn, which I think is fine. I think without the keeper in the list, it's probably a go-to unless you're really struggling for bodies or for a screen or for something else, and you go, actually, I'm going to do something else. Yeah. I think for me, out of the lists, I was the first list. I was kind of the one I liked, but I think the more and more I think about it, the more I like the Sigvald list.
Okay.
But
you want the first and the the first and the second list that we talked about to have a baby, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Somewhere in between. But again, even then, like this Faultless Blades list, I think if the meta is very character monster mash heavy strong, it's going to be a real counter for
day. That. Yeah, I know it's like facing people's characters when they're debuffed. It feels like cheating, doesn't it?
As a deaf player, I would just be in like absolute horror trying to beat this, because it's like all, you don't have any shooting, it's all melee.
Poor vampire lord without his ethereal amulet. That is not something I would be pleased about.
But even like Terrorgeist, you know, I know you've got the bite X factor, which is still a thing, but I still think it's a decent option.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a big fan of Slaanesh book. I think people who've written it off, you need to probably have a second look at it. I think if you're and actually it's really funny because there's lots of people collecting Slaanesh, and I think it's because they're not obvious power and they're not top end, because I don't like playing an army that's really powerful. That's why I sold my old Slaanesh army, and it's something that Ant talks about on from the AOS coach, when he talks about on his show that he shelved his army because it wasn't fun for the other person when you just make them go last and delete everything, or you get shot off, and it just wasn't interesting to play with. Whereas I think this book is really interesting.
I've done that. The best I've ever, the best I've ever been was before I started ETC practice with the Bone Splitters. I felt like really up on my knowledge of the game in general. I was playing an army that participated in every phase, loads of movement, proper cerebral list to play, exhausting to play, but rewarding. And I went from that to target priority, and I just got so much worse. I got very good at that army. That was the aim. I'm fine with the fact that I did it. ETC was sick, but it made me worse at Warhammer by a lot.
Yeah.
By loads.
I don't think there's something to be said for like playing an army that makes you a better player. I remember the biggest gains I got in my play was when I went and played a High Elf army back in 6th edition with Sword Masters and NMSU,
where stuff matters,
where
basically.
Everything was important, but nobody saw it, and nobody really understood why I had little units of 6 Sword Masters in lines and things like that, and eagles. And I remember absolutely schooling people up because they'd never seen anything like it, didn't know how to deal with it. As when everyone was running like Death Star of Knights plus stuff, and then I was like, no, I'm going to run like lots of small units that do a thing and just not care about losing any of them. So it's almost like you don't know where the squidgy center is to get into. You just
having options as well, right? If you face something you don't understand, if you have an army that does more things, you are more likely to have something to be able to, square peg that square hole. Whereas if all you do is one thing, then you do that one thing.
I think that's the flexibility in list writing is something I want to have, and some books just don't give you the option.
Yeah, sick army to change as well, because you can change 150-ish or 350-ish points. You could change that every 2 months, and you could play a completely different feeling army for that small alteration in a hero or in your Death Star, or swap out shooters for melee or vice versa, or even just change temple thing.
Yeah,
that's infinitely playable, infinitely flexible. Several different types of lists there. The moment you dropped the big dude as well, like your list to completely change, and you'd have 400 points.
Yeah, and I think in the Pretenders list you could drop him out and put something else in. You might find that when you start playing with him, he just isn't worth 400 points. I doubt
he's slow
it.
or something.
Or
well,
yeah, maybe.
You're using This is something I wanted to cover, right? If you're going at your opponent, you're presuming you're going to be trying to roll a 6 on his run roll, right? That's going to be what he does quite a lot, is moving your flotilla island of resilience forward as fast as possible.
I think most scenarios you need to get to the mid table to get to capture.
So turn 1 you're doing it, and then you're not doing it.
And I don't think it's a bit like playing with Catacross. So I've played a lot with Catacross and OBR, and for me he doesn't need to be fast, because you might use a Relentless Discipline to get the table on the first turn, but then he's blobbing around the middle, and it's the same with Mortec Guard.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a lot quicker than they are, because they only move 4. I think he's moved 6. But the thing is like you don't need, you just don't need to be any further up the table, especially when you've got shooters, because you don't need to chase the game with him. He just needs to stand around where your stuff is and just blob in. It's a bit like a cauldron. You don't need to, he doesn't need to be like flying across the table.
You don't want that thing though where you don't do it turn one and then he's just about out and you have this weird position like
100%. You'd be running him up first turn, but I mean, like once he's in the mid table,
I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it's just as a general rule of thumb, if your army's going up, you should be sixing his run.
Maybe. But command points are a premium, especially with the abilities that you get from these hosts.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, the reroll, you get to reroll runs with the haze, so you don't need to necessarily use a C.
Yes.
So
that's a very good point.
But
I think
even if you just
get value back from that,
as long as you deploy him aggressively, you're fine. Like I don't.
Yeah.
I think you're because his buff is if you're within 12 of him. So as long as your units aren't like too far away from him, then I think it's fine.
As long as their maximum point is 11.5 or whatever.
And the good thing about shooting is that you make them come to you, right? So that's why I think
a big difference from old.
And
Slaanesh.
They never had it, and like I think this is the biggest X factor with the Slaanesh book is people not really realizing the shooting makes this army like well-rounded. You've got shooting, you've got combat, you've got speed, you've got summoning, you've got tricks.
There's quite a lot of magic too.
Magic.
You keep having a lot of magic by accident in your list that you're writing,
and you can get some of the best Slaves to Darkness stuff in there without without feeling like, I can't get shooting or I can't get this. It's like you can have all of it. You can have your cake and eat it.
Do not underestimate Chaos Warriors or Chaos Knights either. I think Knights are Knights
are great. Like, I mean, even Varangard. I mean, Varangard aren't awful. I mean, like, I think you can, there's lots of stuff you can take. You have to be aware that the limitations on keywords. So, it says Slaves to Darkness unit. So Shrine doesn't buff Slaanesh Head Knight units. And you might have to worry about the Keeper says Head Knight units. So it doesn't mean you can't do it with Knights. But there are other ways to get double pile-ins with units. Varangard get it innately. You can do it with the Chaos Lord. Chaos Sorcerer can buff Slaves to Darkness units to make them very good in combat, very good at resilience. And what you do is, and Gluteus, the great thing about him, he doesn't need to buff your units, he debuffs their units. And it's the same with the
quite a lot of your spells do
speaker.
that. And
So I think
Varangard are heroes, aren't they? That's probably got some utility.
Yeah.
Are the Varangard's heroes?
The what, sorry?
The Vanguard, are they heroes?
No, they're only heroes in Knights of the Empty Throne, which is a Slaves to Darkness allegiance. So that's Nick Morton's been playing that a lot, but I think it's okay. But I think for me, like the Slaanesh book's just got all these options. It's got a lot of allies. It's got stuff you can do. It's very flexible. It's way more competitive than I think people are giving it credit for. And I think one of the things you can do with it is the battle off the table, which is does your opponent know what it does? Have they prepped for it? Have they changed their list for it? Can you make them into making bad decisions with stuff like, well, I'm going to put this stuff off the table now. You've left a gap. Sigvald's in your army. And you could have, it's so disruptive, like even the Mask or Sigvald on their own could be so disruptive to your opponent's plans that it's worth that in itself is worth more than you can count, really.
Yeah. I think taking the Keeper in your main line is kind of a very stealthy, huge difference to the army because I don't know what a Keeper is in depravity. Is it 10 or something?
I believe it is.
It's like 10 or 12.
14.
It's not okay. Not cheap.
It's a lot.
Point, basically.
So. I've got it here. So a Keeper Seekers is 12. Sorry, 12.
Okay, that's cool. So if you're not building up to that, you could be building up to a 6 or a 5, and that is so much more achievable. So you're restricted to a unit per turn. You're not always going to get
5 Seekers for 6.
Yeah, you're not going to get to do exactly what you want in every one of your turns, or you might wipe something out by accident. It's not necessarily bad, but might be for what you're going after. Getting to drop a thing a turn means that rather than dropping 4 things in the game, you could be dropping 5. Or for the 3 most important turns, which is the first 3 turns, you could be dropping something a turn rather than something in 2 of those turns. And even if it's not as big and sexy or whatever, you did get to do something flexible. Again, screwing with your OP, their mind, the table, whatever it is, that has a value. And I hadn't thought about that when we did the last show for sure.
Yeah. And I think like even like putting a Rapturous down, although she's lost the innate ability to generate depravity, she's got a shooting attack, so it gives you a way to do it, and then you get the
debuffs their casting or something as well. That's not bad. That's tasty.
No, there's several ways to debuff their casting with Slaanesh actually, which is another thing that again, if casting comes into the meta, you've then got a way, and because it's range dependent as well, like having her as one of the units that you stealth on could be good because it's in range, and they're like, oh, I'm licensed to cast.
You definitely get to do something.
So I think the Contorted Epitome gives you you have to reroll successful casts, and I think she gives you a -1. So something like that. So there is a combo there. I used to run it in the old book. But yeah, I mean, I think Slaanesh is very strong. I think people are underestimating it. Is it top tier or S tier, as people want to say? No, but I don't really think many books will be going forward because obviously, from a games design point of view, that's a problem. You don't want those kind of things happening. Seraphon and Zinch are sort of White and KO are kind of like up and around the top. Do I think they're a little bit weaker than that? Yes. Do I think the Daughters on paper look stronger? Yes, but I think in the long run, Slaanesh will be up there. And I think against Daughters as well, like because you even got ways to stop people using command abilities, using Stupefy and Subvert. So you can shut down command abilities, you can shut down hit rolls, you can debuff wound rolls, you've got so many options. So, you know, debuff magic. So depending on what's popular in the meta, you could adjust your list accordingly. You know, and
if Daughters do get popular, I think Chaos Knights are a sick option because Daughters do not like being hit by heavily armored cavalry or high impact cavalry. They hate it.
I think Sigvald against if our Cauldron Guard are really popular, Sigvald's just going to ruin it. Because they've got no shooting, they can't kill him at range. He's literally just going to run in and just carve the unit up, and you'd be like, "Well, go on then."
Your potential to block Marathi as well is if you're debuffing her. You know, one of the best things you can do is just
you're -2 to hit, -3 to hit.
I'm not killing you, and you're not killing me as fast as you want.
Yeah, you're not going to kill me. I'll quite happily tank big Marathi with my Keeper of Secrets, and just start piling in round and hitting other stuff.
Or you could even be spreading debuffs around her.
And then keep going. Do you want to take, because you could even go Dark Temptations, take D3 Mortals. She gets +1 to hit. Don't really care because you're -3. Okay, on a 4+ you're dead, so you're not going to do that, are you? So it's like, I think she's got a rule now that protects her against auto death. But anyway, it's like the thing is, it's like you've got like the more I think about Slaanesh and the more I play it, the more excited I am from a play point of view what you can do with the book. So for me, like as a competitive player, I can see that my book isn't going to be obsolete or ruined by an FAQ or a points adjustment. I'm going to have lots of options. I'll be able to adapt to the meta, and I'm always going to be relevant. So why not invest the time and effort in the army now to get the most out of it? And I think if you could go back in time to when Daughters first come out and say, and you knew what was going to happen over the next 3 years, they would have been an amazing army to collect, a bit like Idenef, because they're always going to be relevant. But you've seen people who have been successful with that army swap to a non-Daughters army and just tank completely because it's so. I mean, it like the old book was so crutch. It was just. You don't need to be good, like, to do well with that, but you're not going to get good by doing well with it. So,
especially in a combat environment, and in a non-combat environment, you get the other side, which feels very harsh, which is you might get shot off before you got to be overpowered. Yeah,
and Super Daughters is amazing. Don't get me wrong, but out of the two, I'm more excited about playing with Slaanesh.
Cool.
And I think long term, they're going to be good for more relevant for longer.
Sure.
So,
well, on the subject of them, because I don't want to make it seem like we've done a show bagging on them, I am looking now that one of the bonuses of having a book which is crazy efficiently pointed across the board, and everything is not a bad choice, is everything is not a bad choice. So I am trying to write some stupid lists And I mean, like Russ's eyes now. He's dying inside as he can imagine what cogs I've got whirring in my head. But there are some properly weird lists. Their allies pool is small but very, very flexible, and most of it's good because it's cities and IDNF, which is great.
I think like the way that what we're talking about here is the next show we're going to do some lists for daughters which aren't your typical.
They're not going to be typical.
So, but effective, because the good thing about the daughters book is so much of that book is effective that you don't have to stay on point or message of Cauldron Guard or Viperic Guard to be relevant. And actually the advantage you'll get from a competitive play point of view off the table, if your opponent not having the knowledge or being prepared for it, will offset the reduction in raw power you get by playing the cookie cutter lists. And I think that there's an interesting discussion to be had there of how do you make daughters interestingly different to the previous competitive lists in a way that gives you an advantage at an event. And that's what we're going to tackle in the next show.
A way to do it with there's several ways to do it with a sick theme as well. I'm not talking, Russ is laughing now, but I'm really good at picking awesome themes for armies.
Yeah.
Like Turquoise.
They're all on
seriously though, there are some amazing allies options that fit in seamlessly and are old daughters models, literally, that you can just pop in there and your army could look properly internally cohesive and have like a hit and run theme or an ambush theme or, you know, like a monster theme or something like that. And I am genuinely interested by them. And there's also one stupid list that I am somewhat tempted by myself, which is Mixed Order.
Yeah, it's not really a daughter.
Sorry, Russ. It doesn't matter.
It's just got Marathi. Right? So I'll put a link to the lists in the description if you want to like this video, if you liked it, and comment below if you don't agree with me or you do agree with me or you want to discuss it. You can also join in the discussion on our Discord. And thanks for listening.
Yeah, absolutely. The person who puts the most interesting Slaanesh list in the comments, I will send a Artis Opus Series D brush set to as well. We didn't think of that. Sorry for ambushing you, Russ. But I want to see what people can come up with. So pop the most interesting list in the comments, and please put in, you know, if you've got like, I think this is particularly good at defensive play or offensive play, or this is playing MSU and darts or magic or whatever it is, give us a little bit of a description there on your list. I would love to see them because I wouldn't mind being tempted by the temptation.
Tempted by temptations. That's what it's all about.
Exactly.
If you listen to this podcast and you want to enter that, then just hop over to the YouTube channel and enter a comment in there, and then we'll enter you as well. So thanks for watching or listening, and we'll talk again soon.
All about having fun, being a pain in the butt. Goodbye.